opportunities to kind of get ripped off or to overpay for a coin or to get, degrading. So I've just stayed away from that.
Okay. And another question is, which currency do you see benefiting the most? Do you see the euros?
I don't know. I think ultimately I've always thought that the Asian currencies, once they decouple from the dollar and they stop pegging and they stop intervening to prop up the dollar, I think those are the countries where the currencies have the most potential to rise. Because remember, look at where all the productivity is. Look at where all the goods are being produced. Those are the countries that really need to have a higher currency because they have these huge trade surpluses which really shouldn't exist. Their own people should be buying more of the stuff that they produce. The reason they're not is because their currencies are being suppressed in value by their governments. And so those currencies have the most to gain, although we don't know when they're going to make these explosive moves because right now the governments are doing everything they can to prevent that from happening.
Right. And just final question. I have an E-Trade account, and I can purchase Hong Kong dollars but not the Chinese RMB. Is there a difference, significant difference between?
Well, it's a different currency. I mean, and the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the U.S. dollar right now. The RMB is kind of like a soft peg.
Okay.
But, and I know at E-Trade there are a few markets that you can access, but there are a lot more markets you can access at Euro Pacific, so I would advise you to work with us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
The next call, I think, is John from Kansas.
Hey, Peter, how you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
A couple quick questions for you, sir. One, I heard Ron Paul on the show say that military might affects the value of the dollar. Being that we're by far the strongest military in the world, how does that have an impact on the value of the dollar going forward?
Well, obviously, look, our military presence and our military might is obviously visible, and, it certainly creates the illusion of vitality and economic strength, and it helps support the dollar. But, ultimately, if we don't have a strong economy, we're not going to have a strong military. The Soviet Union had a very strong military, and the whole country collapsed, and eventually they lost that military dominance because they couldn't afford it anymore. And, the reality is the United States only has a strong military because the world is lending us the money to finance it and to maintain it and to supply it. And ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter. I think, the dollar's going to collapse despite our military presence. In fact, our military commitments are helping to undermine the dollar because, we can't afford it. It's one of the things that's draining us dry. Now, there are people that think that because we have such a strong military that we could blackmail the world, that we could force the world to buy our bonds because we could threaten to, invade them or nuke them. I don't think that that's going to happen. I mean, that would imply that, Americans, our government is inherently evil. I don't think they're evil. I think they're incompetent. I think they're greedy. I think they lie. But I don't think, they're going to threaten the world or blackmail the world with a nuclear Armageddon if our creditors don't buy our bonds and ship us their goods. So in the end, I don't think the military might is going to do anything, and the dollar's going to collapse anyway.
Okay. One more quick question. I'm an entrepreneur, Peter. I'm in real estate. I've made a lot of money in the last couple of years. I'm in the Midwest where our market's hung in there real well. But I'm looking to start a business, and I'm young. I read your book, Bull Moves in Bear Markets, and where would you, 25-year-old Peter Schiff right now, where would you move to? I'm looking to start a business. What country?
In the United States, or are you looking to move abroad?
I'm going wherever the money is. So if the money's up, I think that's where you got to go. So what?
Yeah, look, I don't know. The U.S. is going to be tough. I would definitely try to, do something in the resource sector, in, agriculture or mining, or, try to think of something that we could do that had export potential. But I know it's going to be increasingly difficult in the environment that I see ahead. If you really had, you also might look at, opportunities abroad in other countries. And especially, my fear is that it's going to be very, very difficult over the next few years based on what the government is going to do. The more the government interferes, the more they stimulate the economy, the worse the economy gets. And the worse it gets, the more they stimulate it. And it's a self-perpetuating spiral where the government constantly believes that the problem isn't solved because the stimulus isn't big enough. And they never reassess the whole concept of the stimulus and that the stimulus itself might be making the situation worse. So I don't know. I mean, it's difficult, but certainly you got to, look at the industries that are going to be growing. The service sector has to contract. We have to move more towards good production and manufacturing. We have to move more towards export. The bull market in agriculture and raw materials is going to continue. So you want to try to position yourself to be in those areas.
I just saw today that Barack Obama is reading books on what FDR did coming out of the Great Depression. I'm thinking, yeah, that's great, but, back then we were a creditor nation. Right now we're the greatest debtor nation in the history of the world.
Plus, you also have to remember that everything FDR did made the Depression worse. So if he's going to read the book, if he's going to read on what FDR did, the takeaway should be make sure not to do that. It's amazing. The guy gets into office in 1932. And by the time World War I breaks out, 9 years later, we're still in a depression, and somehow he's credited for getting us out of it. In fact, I think the depths of the repression were 1936. Before, whatever. I mean, it's crazy. We got out of the Depression despite the New Deal, not because of it.
I totally agree.
We would have got out a lot sooner had he not done anything.
Yeah, and I think he's about to take the New Deal to a whole new level, which is going to be a total disaster. But
well, again, that's what I wrote in my little book. But the thing I mentioned is that we're already bankrupt from the old New Deal. We can't afford the new one.
Absolutely. What would be the top maybe 2 or 3 countries that you would move to start a business right now if you were looking to go in?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I only speak English. I mean, so New Zealand, Australia come to mind, but I think places like Singapore, Hong Kong, maybe Shanghai. It's very easy to go into business there if you can get in there, and there's very low taxes and regulations. So I think those are ideal places for a young entrepreneur to try to set up a business and to try to to make something of themselves.
You don't think you could go to a country that doesn't speak English and take advantage of the fact that we're coming from America and we understand we knowing English, going to Singapore or China or a country like that?
Most people in Singapore speak English. It's spoken, and certainly, English is the most widely spoken second language in the world, and certainly most young people, anywhere they grow up, they learn English in school.
Right.
But, it's certainly better for you to speak the native language as well. If you want to succeed in a business, it's hard to say, you're going to go into a country and only speak English and not speak the native tongue. I think you should be able to speak both.
You bet. Well, I appreciate it, Peter. It's fun to hear a voice that understands economics, unlike all these clowns in Washington and these people on CNBC.
Well, thanks a lot for the call. Good luck to you. Next call is, I think, Jerry from Florida. Is Jerry there? Why is everybody dropping off? Is Neil there from California? Xavier from Virginia?
Yes.
Hi, it's Peter Schiff.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking the call. I heard this from 2 different sources. One at a presentation at the DC Money Show from a gold bullion dealer, and from Max Kaiser on radio show on YouTube. I'm not sure if you know Max Kaiser. Yeah,
I know Max Kaiser. I've seen his stuff. He's pretty funny. Good guy.
Okay. I think you share similar views on U.S. economy, but I think he's much more animated than you are.
Yeah, well, he usually has his props. I see him on there with his bananas. He says the U.S. dollar used to be backed by this, and he holds up gold, and now it's backed by this, and he holds up bananas.
Yeah, he uses toilet paper for gold for the dollar. Yeah.
Anyway, so what's your point of your question?
My question is, they were mentioning that the demand for physical gold has been skyrocketing, and it is becoming harder to satisfy physical gold demand.
Yeah, that has happened. Basically what's been going on, and I'm in contact. I talk with a lot of